on the death of Jamal Khashoggi.
We're getting some terrible decisions from the Ninth Circuit, as usual. I know that Chief Justice John Roberts, has been speaking a little bit about it, and I think and I have a lot of respect for him. I like him and I respect him, but I think we have to use some common sense. Saudi Arabia has been a long-time strategic partner. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to conclude that the Crown Prince did it, but I will say this, I don't know. I don't know.
Kevin Corke is live in West Palm Beach, Florida. Okay, Kevin, so critics say when it comes to Saudi Arabia and Khashoggi, the White House is choosing to look the other way. What are they saying about that?
Well, I've got to say this, Julie, and I'm glad you ran that clip there of the sound because it really underscores the White House's thinking on this. They say, at least on the record, this is complicated. They note the sanctions that they've put on those individuals that they believe were involved in this circumstance. They also talk about the strong diplomatic outreach, and yet on background, they will tell you, listen, Kevin, this is about a big picture of you versus maybe looking at a very specific incident. And it's that sort of thought process that seems to be guiding the White House's thinking on this. Now, as I've also pointed out, the president laid that out during that Thanksgiving chat with U.S. service personnel yesterday, obviously also talking to the reporters in the room and explaining his mindset that this is a clear idea for him.
Saudi Arabia has been a long-time strategic partner. They're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in our country. I mean, hundreds of billions. They're keeping the oil prices low. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to conclude that the Crown Prince did it. The CIA doesn't say they did it. They do point out certain things, and in pointing out those things, you can conclude that maybe he did or maybe he didn't.
Now, clearly what critics are going to say, Julie, is you lose the moral high ground if you're ceding that because of dollars and cents. That's certainly the argument that a lot of critics are making this morning. Julie?
So then, Kevin, how credible then is the president's threat to shutting down the border to stop the migrant caravan that he's been warning about?
Well, I tell you what, if you saw those pictures from Monday over at San Ysidro, you can certainly tell that the president means business when he says that he might do this. Let me take you to Twitter, though, and share just a bit of what he's talking about today, maybe thinking that if he can get Congress to do their part, he won't have to take such extreme measures. He said this on Twitter. Republicans and Democrats must come together, finally, with a major border security package, which will include funding for the wall. After 40 years of talk, it's finally time for action. Fix the border for once and for all caps, now. The president has also said, as you pointed out in your lead-in originally, that he's authorized troops to use force, lethal force, in fact, if necessary, against the approaching migrants, and while also threatening to close the border if it means protecting American safety and sovereignty.
If they have to, they're going to use lethal force. I've given the okay. Yeah, if they have to, I hope they don't have to. But, you know, you're dealing with a minimum of 500 serious criminals. So I'm not going to let the military be taken advantage of. I have no choice.
So White House officials have been pretty clear. They say the goal is, yes, we want workers. We want them to come here lawfully, but we also want them to come based on merit. And that means, if need be, they will upset the apple cart to try to keep people from taking advantage of the asylum system as it currently stands.
All right.
Julie?
All right, Kevin Corke, thank you very much. Of course, we're going to have much more on this coming up.
And let's dig a little deeper now on that showdown brewing at the southern border. President Trump threatening to close the border if the White House believes Mexico has lost control of the situation. This as more migrants arrive seeking asylum in the U.S. Jonathan Hunt is live in Los Angeles with more on this. Jonathan?
Good morning, Rick. With around 5,000 migrants now on Mexico's side of the border, President Trump is threatening, as you just heard, to shut the southern border completely.
If we find that it's uncontrollable, Josh, if we find that it gets to a level where we are going to lose control or where people are going to start getting hurt, we will close entry into the country for a period of time until we can get it under control.
The entire border?
The whole border.
And with around 5,800 U.S. troops now deployed to the border, President Trump compared the work those troops are doing with the work the U.S. military is doing around the world as he spoke to some of those stationed overseas on Thanksgiving Day.
You want to make sure that you know who we're letting in, and we're not letting in anybody, essentially, because we want to be very, very careful. So you're right. You're doing it over there. We're doing it over here. And your people at the border.
At the border yesterday, U.S. Customs and Border Protection shut down vehicle traffic at the San Isidro port of entry for what they termed a large-scale operational readiness exercise. It wasn't clear whether it was directly related to the ongoing caravan situation. And on the Mexico side, a group of around 500 migrants marched toward the border yesterday to demand better living conditions as they prepare for what could be a months-long wait to get their asylum applications processed. They were met and stopped by Mexican police. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo reiterated President Trump's point yesterday, saying, quote, "The caravans will not be permitted to enter the United States." Secretary Pompeo also acknowledged the dangers the migrants face and said, Rick, the U.S. will work with Mexico to meet the challenges the caravans have created.
Certainly
Rick?
looks like more showdowns ahead. Jonathan Hunt in Los Angeles. Jonathan, thank you.
So for more on all of this, let's bring in Daniel Halper, contributing editor to the Washington Free Beacon. Thank you very much. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So what do you make, first of all, of the president's threats to shut down the border? He has essentially said that he wanted to stop the, this whole ambassador program or this, asylum program where people are allowed to come into this country. The courts don't necessarily agree with him on that. So his plan B, shut down the border. Do you think that would ever happen?
I think it may. I think this hasn't been in lockstep with what he's been advocating ever since he started running for president. And I think there was this general misconception that his concern about the caravan had only something to do with the 2018 election and that after the election he would no longer care about it. But I think if you think about it from his perspective, from the president's, look, this is his last best chance to get a border wall done. And Congress, he has a Republican Congress for basically another month. And if he can get them to act now, he has a greater chance of doing that than trying to get a Democratic House and Republican Senate to get together and provide border wall funding next year or in the next Congress. And I think that's not lost on the president. And I think taking drastic measures, showing how much that he cares about it right now to try to get something done is perhaps what he's trying to do here.
I mean, December is going to come and go so quickly, and so the Republicans have very little time. Let's say the border wall funding is not approved by January 1. What happens when the Democrats take control when it comes to immigration?
Well, he's going to look for leverage, I think. I don't think, in a way, I think you're right. It's not likely to happen. Very little tends to happen in lame duck Congresses, and I doubt we're going to see border wall funding in this one. I think the president's going to look for leverage. I think that he understands that this is a major promise that he made in the 2016 presidential election. Remember, the next election for him is 2020. I think he wants to be able to say that he has done or he has tried to commit to this main promise. I think he looks for leverage over the Democrats. He tries to say, I'll give you, something in exchange for this, and
right.
I think he tries to work out some sort of deal, as he's inclined
and you just
to do.
You just highlighted the fact it's a lame duck session. Most times, nothing gets done. That's the problem. And the solution, I would imagine, is that rather than trying to just jam through all this policy by January 1, which is unrealistic, why not somehow come up with a compromise? Because the Democrats are going to come January 1st, take control of the House. So what kind of compromise could there be? The Democrats have to see, obviously, that this border crisis is looming, and it's getting worse by the year, with thousands heading to the border, 500 breaking off, literally and some of them already crossing. And the Border Patrol agents obviously are overwhelmed. The Democrats must see there has to be some sort of resolution, and granting asylum to each one that comes across our border is obviously not the solution.
There will be some pragmatic Democrats who definitely make that case within their caucus, but there's a lot of left-wing Democrats who got swept into office in this recent election who are not going to want to compromise at all. Obviously, I think the Democrats are going to be pushing for infrastructure next Congress and for other big government, big spending that President Trump might be inclined to do. There are paths, of course, that are conceivable, but that's if both sides want to make a deal. Right now, there's no reason to believe that the Democrats want to make a deal. And of course, we don't even know who their leader is going to be. So there will be inclination. Do not make any deals with Donald Trump, no matter what. Just bring it to a standstill and wait till next election. So I agree. And by the way, Hillary Clinton the other day, she actually said something to the effect of, we need to, in Europe, if you want to stop the populist rise, you need to put a curb on migration. So there are, in a way, there is this realization we have to stop this issue. Otherwise, people of a populist nature are going to gain control. The question is that message heard loud and clear among the Democratic caucus? Maybe not.
Yeah, it's just where are they going to put them? So if you don't want to block them, then where do Democrats expect for them to go, and who's going to pay for it? That's the question I'd like to see answered. Daniel Halper, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming on. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Rick.
The fallout continues after President Trump doubled down on his defense of the Saudis, despite many signs the Crown Prince could be directly linked to the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Ahead, former State Department advisor Christopher Whitten joins us with his analysis.
Also, Republicans want to question Loretta Lynch and James Comey about just how they investigated Hillary Clinton's emails. Will they get answers yet? What caused the bus to turn over? None of the injuries, though, considered serious.
The Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee issuing subpoenas to former FBI Director James Comey and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch. House Republicans want to question both former high-level Obama officials about how the Justice Department and the Bureau handled the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private server. Let's bring in Connecticut Democratic Congressman Jim Himes. He's the chairman of the House New Democrat Coalition and sits on the House Intelligence Committee. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Rick.
Republicans say this is about decisions made and not made by the DOJ during the 2016 presidential election, choosing to pursue President Trump's alleged ties to Russia, but not Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. What say you?
I say that's just absolutely not true. The FBI investigated Hillary Clinton's use of that server. As you know, Jim Comey, during the presidential campaign, announced the existence of that investigation to the public, did not announce the investigation or the existence of the investigation into the president and his campaign, and then famously, 11 days before the election, announced that he was reopening that investigation. So that investigation of the server has been undertaken. It has been reviewed by the Inspector General. And by the way, it's been reviewed by people like me who have access to classified information, which is why, look, I welcome the testimony of Jim Comey and the former Attorney General. Every time these individuals have the opportunity to speak in public, the truth comes out, and truth is not the friend of those Republicans like Devin Nunes and Bob Goodlatte, who are just desperate to get back to the topic of Hillary Clinton and her emails.
Well, that's because Republicans argue that there wasn't enough done, that they may have had an investigation, but it didn't go far enough and didn't put her perhaps in the spot that they think she should be in at this point.
So these same Republicans put her for 9 hours of open testimony in front of one of their own investigations. So look, I understand, especially now that it turns out that the president's daughter was doing exactly what Donald Trump ran on, using a private email account for government business. I understand how they might want to go back to the Hillary Clinton thing. But look, this has been aired 6 times till Sunday. And as I say, bring it on. Let's air it some more, because look, I've been living this for a year or so. I've been living the allegations that there was improper behavior at the Department of Justice, that President Obama wiretapped Donald Trump at Trump Tower. None of these things turn out to be true. And the more people are testifying in public about the fact, the more it will be apparent that all of these allegations are just completely made up.
Well, Congressman, as far as Ivanka's emails are concerned, the White House has made it pretty clear there are a lot of differences between her and Hillary Clinton, that she didn't create a private server in her home or office. She never transmitted classified information. She didn't delete any emails, and all of them were retained in conformity with records preservation laws and rules. So they say this is apples and oranges. They're not the same
Well,
thing.
Of course they say this is apples and oranges. I could point out that you've got very senior government officials breaking the rules. And look, I'm not justifying Hillary Clinton's use of a private server. I think that was wrong, just as it was wrong for the president's daughter to do it. And I'm sure that they can find out that one used a Dell and the other used an Apple, and one is blonde and one is brown hair. They'll do everything they can to find the differences. The fact is, you had senior government officials going against protocol, and who knows whether those were retained or not. Maybe if there's an investigation into Ivanka's use of emails, we'll discover that the behavior was as similar as it looked. Look, at the end of the day, that's not the important thing. At the end of the day, the important thing is that the American public regain confidence in the FBI, in the CIA, for example. Once again, the President of the United States is saying that all the good work done by the CIA around the Saudi Arabian killing of Khashoggi, I don't care. I don't believe that. Who knows? We've got a lot of work to do to reestablish the confidence that Americans should have in organizations like the FBI and the CIA and the Department of Justice.
Congressman, what we do know is that Jim Comey is set to appear in 10 days, December 3rd, and that Lynch will appear the next day on the 4th. And Jim Comey tweeted yesterday, "Happy Thanksgiving," got a subpoena from House Republicans, and he wrote, "I'm still happy to sit in the light and answer all questions, but I will resist a closed-door thing because I've seen enough of their selective leaking and distortion. Let's have a hearing and invite everyone to see it." Is that what we can expect to go down?
Well, I think what's appropriate in this case is that, look, every American has an interest in the light of day being shined on these issues. No American should be comfortable with the idea that their government is operating behind closed doors. The exception to that, of course, would be if you need to ask Jim Comey, if we need to ask Jim Comey about classified information. So I think at some level, Jim Comey is right. Let's any question that is not about classified information, that is not about something that we don't want out in the public, let's ask it. Let's ask it in open hearing with cameras running so Americans can see both the questions and the answers. And yeah, if you got to ask about something like a, FISA application or something that's classified, then let's get the cameras out of the room. So I think, again, so long as we're not asking Jim Comey about classified information, let's have a good, open, transparent conversation that the American public can see and judge for themselves.
Well, based on past experience, if they do ask him about classified information, he's not going to answer that question, Congressman. We appreciate your time this morning. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving weekend.
Thanks a lot, Rick.
Sure.
So President Trump won't put pressure on Saudi Arabia to come clean about the brutal killing of a dissident journalist. He says the U.S. alliance with the kingdom is too important. Is he right? A former senior advisor to the State Department will be here straight ahead.
Plus, the holiday shopping frenzy has officially begun from Black Friday to Cyber Monday. Are retailers getting the flood of holiday bargain hunts?
The Crown Prince hates it more than I do, and they have vehemently denied it. The CIA points it both ways. It's a very important ally. And if we go by a certain standard, we won't be able to have allies with almost any country.
President Trump there defending Saudi Arabia after the CIA reportedly found a link between Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and the murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. Weighing in now, Christian Whiten, former State Department senior advisor in the Trump and George W. Bush administrations. Thank you very much for talking to us, especially on a holiday weekend. First, let me just ask you, the president is basically saying, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, essentially pointing out that we don't know all of the facts surrounding the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. But he also says that, Saudi Arabia basically says that they didn't do it, that the Crown Prince denies any involvement. So he's going to take the Crown Prince at his word. Is that the right decision?
I think it is. I think we just need to move beyond this at this point. I mean, we should ask the question, what if the Crown Prince was involved? We'll still be faced with the same factors in the Middle East. We're involved in a conflict with Iran. Iran has seen itself at war with the United States since 1979, and Saudi Arabia is a fundamentally important partner in that struggle. They spend $70 billion a year on defense. That's 3 times what Israel is able to spend. That money is used to defend largely against Iran, and that's a very important alliance. And also, there's a huge double standard at play here. I mean, people in Washington aren't pulling their hair out because another ally, Turkish President Erdogan, there's no ambiguity about him. We know that he intentionally has made decisions that has put legions of journalists into prison. So, really what's going on here is a lot of moralizing and very odd.
Yes. You point out the fact that this is a journalist who was victimized here. But it also says a lot about allowing these sort of human rights violations, atrocities, if you will, to continue with the country, of course, that we lean on very much so economically on Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, then, the president cites that the kingdom's influence over oil prices, by the way, is a huge factor here. And he says, quote, if we abandon Saudi, it would be a terrible mistake. And also said that he's not going to destroy the economy of our country over Khashoggi by giving up the arms deals to Saudi Arabia. Do we need Saudi Arabia more than they need us?
You know, it's a symbiotic relationship. I think it's a pragmatic one. No, I think they need us more than we need them, but they're not entirely dependent on us. They could take, for example, a $20 billion arms package that's pending, and they could easily turn to the Chinese, or the Russians in particular would be happy to sell them weapons if we were to cut them off. So, you know, it's a very important thing. You know, one thing I would push back on a little against the conventional wisdom surrounding this case is that this man, Jamal Khashoggi, was a journalist. He wasn't really. He wasn't a reporter. He was an opinion writer. He was an analyst. And what got him killed, frankly, was putting out, he was on the take from the Saudi government. He was eating at the trough. He was receiving Saudi largesse.
Well, he was very critical of the Crown Prince.
Well, then he turned. And so then he went from being a supporter to being an opponent.
Right.
And the Washington Post, which frankly has some culpability here, put out his stuff. I mean, he put out articles like how great the Muslim Brotherhood is, how the U.S. should embrace the Muslim Brotherhood. And he did it. The Post did it not just in English, but in Arabic, which really put him in harm's way.
How should Congress respond?
You know, I think Congress, frankly, should do some oversight for real and put the CIA back in its box. The CIA has done a huge disservice, I think, to the president and to Congress in this instance. You know, those guys across the river, they have a $50 billion budget, $50 billion a year budget, if you look at the whole intelligence bureaucracy, and they're guessing. They don't actually know if MBS was involved in this. They're saying, well, based on what we know about how the Saudis work, then maybe kind of sort of. And then they leak it to the Washington Post in an effort to force the president's hand. So I think, you know, really just need to put this in perspective. And these pleading senators, the outgoing disgruntled chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, Bob Corker, really should just hang it up. I mean, we should just move on.
Right. Yes, I know. But the fact of the matter is he was a journalist. I mean, he worked for the Washington Post. There was an opinion side and there was a journalistic side, just like there is here at Fox News Channel. We've got prime time and they are opinion, and then during the day we're news. But nonetheless, he was a journalist. He was writing about the Crown Prince. And if he stood up to the Crown Prince, as most journalists sometimes have to do, his life should not have cost him.
Right. And I'm not saying he deserved what, and neither is the president, neither is anyone here. We're all saying this is a heinous crime, and it was, and there should be a consequence, and there has been. The president has cut off the refueling mission in Saudi Arabia, refueling their aircraft flying over Yemen. We've we've sanctioned 17 senior members of the royal family. I disagree with you that he's a journalist. I think, yes, at Fox you have opinion, and you have news, and you have at real newspapers,
we
that
protect
division.
Tucker Carlson when he's got people outside his home threatening his family.
I would encourage your guests to take.
Tucker Carlson not be respected the same way as news journalists, the same as Jamal Khashoggi at the Washington Post?
It's important to realize that this gentleman was an Islamic activist. I'm not saying what happened is what he deserved, but if before we go and throw away alliances that are fundamentally important to defending this nation, which is the president's job, the president's job is not to preen and get on the high horse.
All right, Christian Whiten, thank you very much. Appreciate you talking to us.
Opposition to Nancy Pelosi's bid for House Speaker taking another hit as a potential challenger changes her tune. Can Pelosi get the numbers she needs? Our legal panel weighs in. Slides. Jeff Paul is live in Paradise, California, where the entire town was wiped out by the flames. Jeff, what's the latest on the ground there now?
Well, yeah, Rick, the rain that has fallen over the past few days has really helped put out whatever remained of the campfire, where it is now 95% contained. But now authorities are worried that there could be a little too much rain, and that could create new dangers. With so much rain, they're worried about mudslides, falling trees, and in some cases, flash flooding. That'll only further delay the search and recovery efforts. Just yesterday, they found the remains of one more person, bringing the death toll to 8,400, still considered unaccounted for. But that number is constantly fluctuating. In about a day's time from our last update, that number went down by 300 people, and they're hoping that that number continues to head down. But of course, this wet and windy weather is only delaying that process for crews out here. Rick?
Jeff, the images are staggering. We see entire neighborhoods gone. It looks like the one behind you is gone. So how is the community doing on this Thanksgiving week?
Yeah, it's incredible. We spoke with one woman who is just like the folks here at the house that we're standing at, who lost her home, and she said that she cannot believe that it has been 2 weeks since the start of the campfire, and in that time we have learned that more than 13,000 homes have been destroyed. So there's still a lot of people who are living out of shelters, who are bouncing from hotel to hotel, from friends' houses. But yesterday, with the Thanksgiving holiday, it really gave them their kind of first opportunity to sit back, even if it was just for a moment, and enjoy the holiday. Volunteers from all across the area, all across the country, coming together to cook and serve them Thanksgiving dinner. And the survivors we spoke with say it really meant a lot to them.
Sometimes sometimes you take so much for granted. And when something like this has never happened to me personally, and when you lose something in a couple of hours, I mean, literally, our house was probably gone within the first part of the fire.
Now, authorities have started the conversation to start allowing more people who were evacuated to at least come back home and to start assessing those damages. But they want to make sure it is safe first. This wet and windy weather, and it's really starting to come down now, Rick, is only delaying that process.
13,000 homes. Jeff Paul, it's just such a long road ahead for those folks. Thanks very much.
In-party efforts to block Nancy Pelosi from once again becoming House Speaker have hit a snag. Ohio Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, initially considered a challenger, now backing Pelosi's bid just one day after New York Congressman Brian Higgins reversed his calls for new leadership. Let's bring in our political panel. Mustafa Tamiz is a Democratic strategist and former consultant for the Department of Homeland Security, and Ted Harvey, former Colorado State Senator and chairman of the Committee to Defend the President. Thank you, gentlemen, for talking to us. Nancy Pelosi, she is getting closer to reclaiming the Speaker's gavel, Mustafa, after Congresswoman Marcia Fudge dropped her threat to challenge her. Here's where it gets interesting, I think. Fudge says that Pelosi has offered to restore a defunct subcommittee on elections and make Fudge the chairwoman. Does that sound like blackmail to you?
It's not blackmail. It's basically an important initiative, and it's important to Congressman Fudge, and it makes sense to have this.
Right. Okay. Go on. Sorry.
It's not. Look, this is politics, but I have to be honest with you. This is an important initiative. We've seen voter issues around the country. Many states are not doing what they should, and I think this will be helpful. But Nancy Pelosi is arguably the most effective leader, not just of Democrats, but as a Speaker of the United States Congress in modern times. She passed ACA, which protects Americans' right to have pre-existing conditions and not be admonished by insurance companies. She has done her job. She's done it well, and she's going to be the next Speaker in the next Congress.
Ted, is this if you can't beat them, join them? Because it just seems odd to me. I don't know.
Well, I think Fudge understood that she didn't have the votes. Nancy Pelosi is going to be Speaker of the House, and she tried to get whatever she could get out of the deal. And that, like he said, that's politics. That's the way it works. And I think that Nancy Pelosi will be the next Speaker, and she deserves to be the next Speaker. She is the most effective legislator on the Democrat side.
Yeah, no, she is. I mean, she knows how to raise money, and she's certainly a great deal maker. And this is one that I guess it is just politics, but it just seems if the Democrats want to bring in new blood, every time that one actually has the gall, if you will, to actually run against Nancy Pelosi, they get slapped down by Nancy Pelosi, who says, you don't stand a chance, just get behind me. Mustafa, I mean, the issue of voting rights, it's been a top priority of members of the Congressional Black Caucus, which Fudge used to lead. Democratic leadership elections take place a week from today. Is there any chance that anybody else is going to come out of the woodwork, or is Pelosi a sure foot in? And is this part of the plan for 2020?
Look, she has, we just heard from both sides that she's arguably the most effective Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. She's passed consequential legislation. She's someone who always has command of her caucus and is able to pass legislation bipartisanly. If you look at her record, 70% of legislation that passed under her leadership was bipartisan. So here's somebody that's strong. Why would you go looking for someone else? And that's why no one is running against her, because she has proven herself to be an effective leader. It's not like, Paul Ryan, who is going to be remembered as someone who didn't accomplish very much as Speaker of the House. Right. At the end of the day, you elect people that can get the job done. Okay. And Nancy Pelosi can get the job done.
The president says he likes her. Can you believe that? That was a quote, and he wants to work with her. We'll have to wait and see if that happens. All right. Thank you both, Mustafa Tamiz. Thank you. And Ted Harvey. We appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rick.
Did you watch any football with your turkey yesterday?
I did not have time. It was on my TV screen, though. I heard it in the background.
The Bears, the Saints, the Cowboys all have lots to be thankful for. For the Bears, it was another terrific showing by their defense with a big interception helping to extend their winning streak. President Trump doubling down on his dust-up with Chief Supreme Court Justice John Roberts. The feud starting after Trump criticized a federal judge for striking down a new policy for asylum seekers, prompting a rare public rebuke from Roberts. The president hit back yesterday, tweeting in part, Justice Roberts can say what he wants, but the Ninth Circuit is a complete and total disaster. It is out of control, has a horrible reputation, has overturned more than any circuit in the country, the president wrote. So let's bring in criminal defense attorney Jonna Spilbor for more on this. Is the Ninth Circuit a disaster? Is that fair?
You know, I would echo the president's sentiment on that. But you know what this really is, Rick? This is travel ban deja vu all over again. Right? We heard these arguments from Trump before. The question I have is, why is the Chief Justice now sort of weighing in on this? And where was he when Ruth Bader Ginsburg was actively criticizing the president and saying very unkind things not that long ago? I'm wondering why the Chief Justice decided to weigh in here.
It certainly seems unusual. We don't usually hear from Supreme Court justices, certainly not in this context.
No, we don't. But Trump is actually making a point, because here we have the country elected our president. We did not elect random judges in any circuit. Yet every time the president does something that he's trying to protect us in the national security context, we get a judge in the Ninth Circuit, because that's, I mean, it borders the Mexican border. We get a judge who shoots it down until we appeal. And I suspect the same thing that happened with the travel ban will happen with this appeal as well.
I want to show Judge Roberts' reaction to the original presidential statement. He wrote, we do not have Obama judges or Trump judges, Bush judges or Clinton judges. What we have is an extraordinary group of dedicated judges doing their level best to do equal right to those appearing before them. That independent judiciary is something we should all be thankful for. Of course, federal judges are appointed by presidents. Presumably they choose judges who are in line with their philosophy.
Exactly.
So isn't it naive to suggest that we don't have judges who are aligned with the president who appointed them?
Naive is being nice. It's just flat out wrong. Of course we have Obama judges, Clinton judges, Trump judges, but that's what they do. We don't elect those judges. They are appointed by our presidents at the time. And if we didn't have those judges, we would have nothing but homogenous